all the curriculum in the universities are outdated and stuff, but education starts from the foundation, from early learning. Then you come to secondary school, then tertiary, and then we start talking about TVET.
A lot of our problems in Sierra Leone, I think, are tied to education, are tied to just that culture of learning that is missing.
And if you say you want to be self-employed, what skills do you need to be successfully self-employed? Not only to earn a living, but also for self-gratification.
Welcome to Honestly Speaking, a podcast where we have real and honest conversations about issues shaping our lives. I'm your host, Antonia Howard. Today we're going to be talking about an issue that affects every one of us, education. The skills needed to succeed are ever-changing in today's world. In Sierra Leone, we have seen an increase in access to education ever since the declaration or the policy free quality education. But the question we're asking is access enough? Are we equipping our young people with the skills and the tools they need to thrive? Are we enabling them to compete with other young individuals across Africa and across the world? Many things come into play when we talk about education. Apart from access, we talk about the quality of the education, we talk about the quality of learning environments. All of that comes into today's conversation. I have with me in the studio Dr. Yakama Manty Jones. She's an economist, an advocate for youth empowerment, and has been at the forefront of education policy and development. She also founded the Yak Jones Foundation, an initiative that promotes literacy by nurturing a culture of reading among children in Sierra Leone. But her work does not stop there, as I said, Nabukuman. She's also the founder of Data Mansa, a platform where young people are taught to collect, analyze, and share data for social and economic good. She's passionate about ensuring young people are ready to compete on a global stage. I'm excited to welcome you to Honestly Speaking.
Thank you. I told you I'm happy to be here.
All right. So let's kick it off then right into the conversation. As you heard from my introduction, access to education is one thing, but when we look at the job market and the skills, knowledge, and everything else employers are looking for, are we really preparing our young people for the job market? The big question is Sierra Leone's education system really preparing young people for the future?
Well, that's a really packed question. And I think it's something that a lot of people do juggle with, and especially when we have the free quality education. So it's made education like a topical issue. But for me, I always say when we want to approach the topic of education, we should come back to the basics. Why is education important? And the thing is, it's not learning for the sake of learning. It's like equipping our workforce to be able to solve problems. So if we have that at the back of our minds in every policy we develop, in every program we implement, we can assess ourselves to say, is what I've designed or what do I plan to teach going to help my learners solve a real-time or real-life problem? So I think if we have that approach, no matter what year we find ourselves in, we will always say, what are the real-life problems that the world's facing now? And how can I equip my learners to address that? So coming back to Sierra Leone, I think we've come a long way, but we also have a really long way to go. And most of the times in conversations around equipping our learners for the current workforce, most people think it starts at university level. That's the time they'll say, oh, the curriculum in the universities are outdated and stuff, but education starts from the foundation, from early learning. Then you come to secondary school, then tertiary, and then we start talking about TVET. But when we thinking about how we can change from the current trajectory, because what's happened has happened. It's how we move forward. I think we've started, but we're not yet at scale. And there are gaps in some of the designs and some of the approaches that we do consider. And for me, one of the first things I think we should master as a country is addressing the skills mismatch. Because if you're looking at the workforce, it's not everyone that goes into the public sector. There's also the piece around the private sector and those that are in self-employment. So if you have a workforce that can go into either of those buckets, what skills do those employers in the public sector need? What skills do private sector people look for? And if you say you want to be self-employed, what skills do you need to be successfully self-employed? Not only to earn a living, but also for self-gratification. Because sometimes we find ourselves doing jobs that we just do it for the money, but doesn't bring us any peace or make us feel that we've actually been productive or solving world problems. So if we're looking at how far we've come, I know a couple of years ago, there was a review to the primary and secondary school curriculum, especially I think for SS, for senior secondary school level, where they said there are different pathways for science, and then there are new subjects added to the curriculum. But since that rollout, do we know how well that's working out? Has there been assessments to know whether it's been successful? Are there challenges in the implementation? So that's unclear. So those are one of the things that we should consider when we're saying, are we actually preparing our learners for the current job market and also the future job market? So we don't know how well our current or recent policies changes are working. The other piece around that also is the TVET thing. So education is about skills development anyway, because even in when we're talking about traditional white collar jobs, it goes, yes, the curriculum will be set. There's definitely, you need to talk about cases in law and stuff, but it's how up to date your examples are. How can you get your learners to see how these foundational theories are being applied in the real world?
Just on that as well, it's about how up to date your examples, your case studies, how up to date they are. And I saw, I don't know if you saw it as well. I saw a Facebook post recently where this guy was talking about somewhere in Sierra Leone, the teacher is teaching a curriculum that
was a long
years
post.
ago. Yes, a very long post. And it just goes to show that, apart from the curriculum being there, teachers also have a role to play. The tutors have a role to play in updating their own teaching methods, first of all. And then you come into what the basics of it is, what you're teaching, So
it's not the key thing, like I said, is how whatever you're teaching can be applied in the real world. For example, yes, economics is a field that will always be there, but then you can't have an economics module and you're not teaching your learners how to code a little, because if you're doing regression, we like doing regression in economics, but then there are now software where you see their standard EViews being integrated with Python. So it's like economists now
that's even mentioned Python.
So and like I needed to learn Python while I was working, so that it's continuous learning.
I mean, there are things you learn on the job because by the time you left uni, after you don't study maybe that thing they not be even exist where they graduate from that course day. And then you come into the workforce and technology is changing, everything is improving. So rather than becoming extinct in your role, you go for update. And the same goes for the education system. Before teacher and the extinct, now they will then definitely for the update their software.
So it's conversations that we have. So that's why you see, I use learners, not students, because what we need to cultivate is a culture of learning. We should prepare learners, not people that memorize stuff. Because even though we're saying preparing for the workforce, the world is constantly evolving. What skills would you need in the future? So it's people that are learners, that are teachable, that would continue to learn, to adapt to what's coming and what's possible, and upskilling what they've already learned. That's the kind of approach we should have for education. So it's not just about memorizing, it's about critical thinking. It's about comprehension, especially when it comes to reading. Not everyone understands what they've read. It's about computational skills, because the basics of numeracy should always be there. It's about adaptability. When you find yourself in a situation, how can you problem solve to get to a solution that's workable for you and for the general society?
Yeah. So when it comes to the responsibility for this to happen, there are different players when it comes to education. There's the government, there's schools, principals, vice principals, there's teachers, and then there's the learners themselves.
Parents.
There's parents. There's a whole village,
Yes.
the society you find yourself in. How would you say this responsibility is shared? Who do you think leads in terms of action to have an updated education system, education sector?
Well, I think everyone has a role to play. All these players have different roles. So, for example, I think if we're trying to do it hierarchically, I think the household and government are at the top. Because, for example, if in situations where government has free quality school education and also rolling out early learning programs, but then there are households where kids still stay home till 5, do not attend early learning or early learning programs, and then just go into class 1. And that's when they want to start to learn how to identify alphabets and stuff. So you see there's something there. So it's having that commitment that when you bring a child into the world, it's like equipping that child to be the most productive that child could be. And that starts in the home. So it doesn't necessarily need to be you having a lot of money. It's like you leveraging what society offers to make sure that you invest the best or the most that you can in that child. And then it comes to the policy frameworks, because definitely we all live in different jurisdictions. And of course, government has the paramount role in setting the policies and regulating how resources are managed for the economy for these countries. So they also have a critical role to play in that, and also in setting the direction and providing that guidance for its citizens. So that's where government comes in. And in that, government has a role not only in setting the policy framework, but also resourcing the implementation of those frameworks, providing oversight in the implementation of the framework, providing performance management, and also creating the space where all these other players can comfortably interact and also contribute to whatever the desired goal is. People always tend to say, oh, we can't engage government and stuff, but also how organized are you to speak up and engage government? Because government cannot meet people individually.
Yes.
So this is where community leaders come in.
Also, some parents don't know better. I mean, some children in school now are the first in their generation, first generation, who are in school, who have probably reached the level they've reached. So perhaps there's that education lacking from parents to organize themselves in a way where they can advocate for better policies in schools, right? Right.
So that's where the leadership comes in. So, and leadership is not just about political leadership at the top, say ministers, presidents, or MPs, even community leaders. That's why I say like Mommy Queens. Now we have school management committees. We have community youth leaders. Because sometimes there's an example that one of my former bosses used to always share. So there's this parent, she's not literate, but then every evening she makes sure she sits with her child to study. And what the child didn't know, that she dips her hand in palm oil and just leaves a small print and puts a mark on the last page you read. So she just comes to check, are you still on that page or not? So it's just interest and just being intentional about equipping your child to make them as productive as they could be. And another thing also that I want to bring to the table is sometimes we talk about policy implementation and say it resourcing, or don't have enough resources, but also it goes beyond that to how we spend the resources that we have. And if you look at education spending in Sierra Leone, a lot of it is recurrent. A lot of it goes towards teacher salaries, a lot of it goes towards procurement, but then we have some capital expenditure that we should undertake in terms of infrastructure, the learning environment. We're talking about digital learning and not being left behind in the fourth industrial revolution, but how many of our schools are actually connected to the internet. Yes, there are programs to connect schools to the internet, but do they have the equipment? Do they have the curriculum loaded digitally to fully utilize those? And then you come to look at from the teacher side, are those teachers fully equipped to actually use the equipment and can train or can teach the kids in terms of digital literacy? You're talking about, yes, infrastructure, you have connectivity, but no electricity. Are we looking to green energy solutions? So it's like a whole system that needs to work seamlessly and move in the same direction, not different parts working in silos. So it's like not an easy problem to solve, but if you look at it from a systems lens, not saying, oh, education is education, it's education at the center and different components moving around that you need to bring all hands on deck to see what they can contribute to the pie to move the numbers in the direction that you want to go.
I agree with that. I'm also thinking about what the role of learners would be in all of this, because I can always talk, say half of what I sabi, not to inside classroom alana, and all na class, and all na college, school. It's that culture of learning that you talked about, constantly being curious to learn, reading, that culture of learning that was built from early foundation. And I can acknowledge that I'm privileged relatively, comparatively, I am privileged. I go private school from primary to secondary school, and then I went to Frabe College. But the foundation been done there for me. I had built that foundation that whatever is said in class is a seed, and then I go and water it and flourish and do more research. And then, but I feel, my opinion is that culture is just lacking, and I don't know how we can. That's one of the gaps. How do we fill that gap?
There are different parts to it. There's a role that the home plays. Like, I really don't want anyone to discount that. And then there's the role that society plays, like a collective, in shaping the mindsets of our current and future workforce. So if you have a child, and whether you're literate or illiterate, what values do you instill in that child? What values in terms of self-development? What values in terms of being a good citizen? What values in terms of contributing to society? What values in terms of what future do you want to see for yourself? Oh, this is my current situation. I don't want that for you. What can you do to make it better? So having those conversations, it's like family making that time. Because yes, sometimes a lot of us are on survival mode, especially in a low income country like this. You have a lot of mothers working hours, need to be out there on the street selling in the informal market. And sometimes even child labor comes into it. So that poverty and survival mindset sometimes skews the skill from actually helping the child to be a child and guiding that child towards a path that will help that child to be the most productive that child could be, versus that child being left to fend for themselves or without supervision because the parents are trying to bring something home. So it's a balance. But in everything I say, it's about you being deliberate about the outcome that you want to see, about the impact that you want to make. Because there's spaces where, yes, now we see like early learning centers in markets. I know FCC has a couple. There are different interventions like that in different countries, because people do see that we need to create the space where it's our responsibility as adults to create the space where we provide everything that we can for these learners to be productive, the current learners to be as productive as they can, and also as we invest in the future workforce. So it's being intentional about these things, mindsets. That's where civic education comes in, because we normally talk about all these traditional things about education, the different skill sets that we need, the different career paths, but then civic education is a huge element that could be transformative in how our workforce can be productive now and in the future. Because no one lives in an island. We're all contributing towards the well-being of a society in which all of us can live and enjoy. So if we don't have a framework or different partners contributing to that civic education space, helping even adults need that to understand how they can be good citizens, how they can be productive citizens, how they can complement the efforts of government and other individuals, how can they complement the efforts of their neighbors to make society wholesome and make it a space where we can all thrive. There'll be a gap, because if even, yes, poverty is a huge game changer, but then civic education can help change mindset, because the mind, the brain, is the most powerful organ.
Yeah. And when you talk about civic education, I'm thinking about this issue of exam malpractice. Because it goes back to what you talked about regarding values, the values from the home, and then what we value as a nation. What do people really hold true as their morals, guiding principles? And
we should have zero tolerance for cheating in any exam, and it should be across the chain. So if it's the students that suffer, there should be punitive measures. If it's the teachers, the invigilator, if it's the parent, there should be punitive measures. But then it all comes back to what the motivation is in terms of the education. If you view education as equipping the learners to solve a problem, then it's not about the paper. Because you know that if my kid doesn't learn, can't pass the exam, that means my kid is not equipped to solve that problem. Then your mindset should be, how can I support my kid to be able to solve the problem, a problem area that they're interested in, or I think would be valuable for their future. So that's why I said the fundamental thing is what your motivation is, or what our understanding is for why education is important.
And that would then bring me to what people said.
Yeah.
Because there was no way I was going to have this conversation and do this podcast without talking to people who experience this, people in the education system, and just hear from them what their perception of these topics we're talking about is.
Hey there! If you want to hear opinions about today's topic, check out the Word on the Street segment on the Honestly Speaking YouTube channel. Real people, real voices, real opinions. You don't want to miss it. You'll find the YouTube link right in the episode description. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe while you're there. Now, let's get back to the conversation in the studio.
For many of those who spoke, having obviously, and this is true for many people, once you finish school, you graduate with a degree, the goal is to find a job within the scope of what you've studied. And for many people, that is not the case. Yes. So there's a gap there in terms of what exists in the job market and what is being taught in universities.
So if we go back to something I mentioned before, is like viewing this problem as with a systems lens. So from the clips we just listened, a lot of the conversations or the sentiments where what's the value for my education? What would I do after? And that, yes, it's linked to education, but it's moving us towards job creation. And this is where the system lens come in. Yes, we do acknowledge that based on a long time of not reviewing our curriculum, not having adequate engagement with the private sector, there's a job skills mismatch. But that's just one part of the problem. There's the other part of us not being intentional, of we've not been sustainable, or we've not been consistent over the years in investing in technical and vocational skills development so that workforce can be able to be self-employed, branch into entrepreneurship, and then we'll have the other piece around financial inclusion. So it's a whole chain. But one of the things I also want to point out is that for countries like Sierra Leone, government is like the largest employer. And government cannot continue being the largest employer. That is where private sector comes in. But then you have the conversations, how large is our private sector in Sierra Leone? Are we intentional about private sector development?
Right.
Are we actually supporting private sector to create the jobs, the number of jobs to uptake what the universities, the TVET centers are churning out? When we also look at our private sector, what sectors are thriving? Are they actually at scale to create the jobs that we need? Or are we concentrate? Because I was just thinking about also the numbers that we prioritize. Because one of the things that I always battled with is private sector development. It's a word that you hear every single day, every budget speech, every project, every NGO. We're supporting private sector. We're working with governments to create the enabling environment for private sector. But what kind of private sector?
That's exactly my question.
Businesses that we're supporting to get the skills that the business owners and their teams need to grow, scale, and create more jobs? Or is it, or we say, oh, there's this donor that's giving $5 million, and each estimate that they're supporting is going to get $1,000. Would that be transformative? Is it supporting 5 million SMEs or supporting 50 SMEs at the level at which the capital injection, the technical assistance can be transformative in there for them? So you help them with the business development services, you help them with the entrepreneurship training, you help them with research and development, so that by the end of that support period, they scale to say this company or this SME that was only able to employ 3 people can now employ 30 people, can now employ 300 people. So which numbers in terms of impact matter? Because no matter what government does, if we collectively do not provide the space or invest in private sector development, we're going to have problems with job creation. We're going to have problems with revenue mobilization. Government will always be broke. Resources will always be scarce. Our skills mobile enough to cross borders. Our certifications recognized abroad. Even the TVET skills, the plumbers, the artisans, the certificates. If you get a certificate, is it recognized outside our borders? Even when we have this whole issue about exams malpractice, do we have a system maybe using blockchain to verify some of our certification? Because sometimes you even try to go and study abroad, the way your transcript is printed, they'll think it's fake. Our mindsets are in the right place. We're moving in the right direction. If you listen to some of the programs that have been rolled out, some of the investments being made, some of the work in upskilling, and I think there's greater awareness about the need for digital skills. There's greater awareness. There's less stigma around TVET skills. It's just how we can come together to improve on what we have, and also how we can leverage learnings from other jurisdictions that have been more successful in doing that and thinking outside the box. And one thing one example I like to provide is like we have a young population, like that's like our most valuable asset. If we upskill all our youth in digital skills and provide them with the tools. For example, when you call some of these international companies, the call centers are in India, in Pakistan, but then the companies
we go do digital skill way light internet no problem.
these things. So, like, if we know what we're working towards, what the global aspiration is, what's the big outcome that we want as a society, then the different.
For example, I know someone teaching computer science, and half of his students don't have computers.
So that is where, like I said, our minds and investments are in the right place, because now I know that there are digital learning hubs that people can access, but it's like scaling, because everything we need to do, we need to scale. And even in terms of the mindsets and the people, we need a critical mass. So it's being consistent and advocating and being intentional about increasing investment in the areas that we need to get us to where we want to be.
So with the work you do, let's talk a little bit about what you do now regarding something like digital inclusion. With the work you do at Data Mansa, how important would you say, because you've worked with young people who perhaps now Data Mansa, they trained them now with these digital skills. How important would you say is digital literacy in fact, I would say from the last 5 years going forward, if someone wants to excel in the workforce or just to succeed in anything that they're doing?
If you follow the trend and you see what the current trends are and where we're possibly heading, you know that digital skills are the way to go, and they're also foundational. So just knowing how to operate a computer, knowing how to do Excel, PowerPoints and stuff, the foundational. Then there's the additional level of knowing how to code and stuff. That is also another angle. Even knowing how to do mobile data collection, analyzing data. So the foundational skills. Because if you're thinking about, we're talking about blockchain, we're talking about AI, we don't know what's going to come after AI. So it's like having those foundational skills that you can continue to build on. So definitely it's the way to go. And it can also help you get opportunities that transcends borders, because with access to connectivity, you have the tools, you have the skill set. Like there are different platforms now where learning from all the pandemics and stuff, remote work. So you might not be able to find an office job in Sierra Leone, but if you have digital skills, you have connectivity, you'll be able to sign up for even data entry work on Fiverr, Upwork and stuff.
Yeah, so we never forget problem with election results, all that in the day. It has to do with data as well and technology.
Yeah, and it's also productive use of the connectivity, because a lot of young people have phones. If even they don't personally own a phone, they know somebody that owns a phone. That I know about groups that own one phone, so everyone will have like a feature phone, but then one would have like a smartphone. What do you use your data for? Is this just to scroll and write random comments? Is it to like go to the University of YouTube? So all of that comes into how we groom our learners on how they can be as productive as they can be, given the current environment in which they find themselves.
Right. So let's do a bit of visionary work now, because a lot of our problems in Sierra Leone, I think, are tied to education, are tied to just that culture of learning that is missing. So if we're to get this right, if we have people who are always learning, who are able to compete on the global stage, what do you see in Sierra Leone's future? What would the future look like for Sierra Leone?
Well, that's a complicated question. So, sorry, because for me, I always say I'm a systems thinker. You should have. So I always don't see just one part of the problem.
You
So
can
yes.
tell me the many parts that you see.
So yes, we have not just Sierra Leone, I can say the entire continent would be the future workforce of the world, given our demographic dividend because we have a young population. But then investing in the humans, the people, is like the most valuable investment, and education is just a part of it. So when we're talking about human capital development, it's education, health, and for us on the continent, food security, agriculture. So it's making sure that child that's born today accesses, not only access it, but has quality education, is healthy enough to go through the learning process and can sustain itself. So those three elements, if we invest in them consistently, adequately, making sure we're inclusive, not leaving anyone behind, then we're on the path to grooming a productive population of productive workforce. So once we have that, I envision a Sierra Leone wherein the learners have the skills, have the access to not only thrive in the formal workspace, but can also be creatives, can be self-employed, but can also access opportunities outside Sierra Leone without leaving Sierra Leone. So that's my kind of ideal Sierra Leone. And when I say learners, is that they're learners. They have the skills. The skills are adaptable. They're able to continue to learn and to address emerging problems or emerging solutions that might come up. So it's like they're well-rounded, not just limited in one space. So that's my vision. So nobody goes to, we're all healthy, we have the skills, and well-fed and cared for at every stage in our lives. So the longevity comes into it.
Yeah.
So we can live long and we all enjoy.
All right. Thank you so much. I think this is it. That's all we have time for in today's conversation. Thank you for your honesty and your passion, Dr. Yakama Jones, and for helping us break down what really needs to change, what needs to happen for us to prepare our young people, not just for now, but for the future. This has been Honestly Speaking. We've been recording live at Black Lion Production Studio. A big thank you to our guest, Dr. Yakama Manty Jones, and our excellent crew behind the cameras. I have been your host. I am Antonia Howard, and this is Honestly Speaking. See you next time.
That's it for today's episode of Honestly Speaking. Thank you for listening and being a part of these important conversations. If you've enjoyed today's discussion, please like and share. And if you're feeling inspired, do leave a review. I'd love to hear what you think. And of course, carry on the conversation online. Share your thoughts, experiences, and ideas using #HonestlySpeakingSL. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay honest.